Mammy Manor. Alrighty, before somebody yells at me, yes, this place does market themselves as a haunted house, or to quote the founder Russ, a survival horror performance house, and they're currently offering 20 grand to anyone who can survive 10 hours of their games. Granted, if you curse or fail a challenge, $500 gets removed each time. Founder Russ McCamey, a former Navy seaman turned haunted attraction enthusiast, doesn't accept any kind of money for this unique experience. Payment is simply a can or bag of dog food. There is a screening process first. Participants must produce a doctor's note, sign a 40-page waiver, pass a background check and drug test, and be screened via FaceTime. A guide has testified that the 40-page waiver signed by participants lists possible risks, that include having teeth extracted, being tattooed, and having fingernails removed. If I didn't already hate the place enough, that does it for me. That's just unnecessary torment. It originally operated in San Diego, but neighbors petitioned to have it run out of the area due to the noise and unsafe attention it brought them, and were successful. There's a total of 3 locations now. Nashville, Tennessee, and Huntsville, Alabama are the 2 that we're going to be talking about though. At the Tennessee location, guests must be 21 or older, or 18 with parental consent, while the Alabama location only allows ages 21 and up. The tour lasts from 8 to 10 hours, but no guest has ever made it all the way through. Now, McCamey originally did not allow safe words for the tour, but has since reportedly allowed them, with guests having the option to use a safe word that ends the tour immediately. The house operates year-round, and there is allegedly a waiting list of over 24,000 people. I just want to know why. During the tour, employees of the manor may physically attack patrons, waterboard them, force them to eat and drink unknown substances, have them bound and gagged, and engage in other forms of physical and psychological anguish. I'm forgetting something. Oh, don't remind me. Oh, right. Participants may also be drugged during their experience. And hey, if that wasn't enough ick for anybody, make sure to remember to smile for the camera while you're enduring this hell. McCamey started filming everything that happened inside the manor as an insurance policy, so he'd have proof of what really happened anytime law enforcement came a-knockin'. In addition, each contestant's experience is live streamed to a Facebook audience of close to 30,000 people. If that's your idea of entertainment, there's a large archive of footage on the official website. So far, no one's been able to escape, and I'm pretty sure everybody leaves with some sort of imprint on their psyche. So big pass from me. Hey, what's creepier than an abandoned schoolhouse with a truly terrifying history? It's hard to think of anything. The Den Schoolhouse is a haunted house attraction set in an actual super spooky haunted house that changes every year, meaning visitors never know what to expect. Imagine a place where the boundary between the living and the dead kind of blurs a little bit, where your heart races and reality morphs into a realm of terror. Nestled in Cincinnati, Ohio, this haunted attraction is not for the faint of heart. The schoolhouse derives its chilling name from a grim past. Once an actual schoolhouse in the early 1800s, it turned into a grim tale of horror and disappearances. Students vanished without a trace, their fate shrouded in mystery. Legends claim that the school's janitor, Charlie, harbored a sinister secret in the basement. Today, the Den Schoolhouse stands as a spine-tingling haunted attraction, drawing brave souls from far and wide. From the moment you step inside, the atmosphere is thick with dread. Dimly lit hallways echo with the distant cries of restless spirits, and you're enveloped in a world where the line between reality and the supernatural blurs. The Den Schoolhouse's sinister reputation stems from its commitment to immersive horror. As you navigate its dark corridors, you'll encounter ghastly apparitions, menacing monsters, and grisly scenes that defy belief. The attention to detail is astonishing, making every room feel like a descent into madness. One of these standout features is the infamous basement, where the malevolent spirit of Charlie is said to dwell. The claustrophobic passages, punctuated by eerie lighting and bone-chilling soundscapes, make it an unforgettable, hair-raising experience. But what truly sets the Den Schoolhouse apart is the dedication of its performers. The actors are masters of their craft, immersing visitors in a chilling narrative that unfolds with each step. They blur the line between fiction and reality, leaving you questioning what's lurking in the shadows, which means job well done. For those who dare to enter, the schoolhouse offers an unforgettable journey into the macabre. It's a place where you might disappear into a world of terror, if only for a night. Kinda like how those students disappeared way back in the day. As you emerge from its haunted halls, your heart pounding and your nerves kinda frayed, you realize that some mysteries are best left unsolved. That is, if you make it out. Pennhurst Asylum. So this asylum is a chilling relic of the past tucked away in Spring City, Pennsylvania, and it beckons the brave and the curious alike. Its ominous history, shrouded in mystery and despair, makes it quite the haunting destination for those willing to, take a little peek around its eerie corridors. Once a state school for the mentally and physically disabled, Pennhurst's dark past is a tale of neglect and suffering. Not unusual, but still Stories of mistreatment and torment linger like lingering echoes in its decaying halls. So the place was shuttered in the 80s, which is all too late in my opinion, but the scars it left behind have given birth to something altogether different. Today, Penhurst Asylum stands as a nightmarish playground for those seeking a brush with the supernatural. From the moment you step onto its grim grounds, you're enveloped in an atmosphere of dread. The abandoned buildings loom, their windows like vacant eyes watching your every move. Inside, the haunting begins. It's a maze of twisted passages, each more unsettling than the last. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on peeling wallpaper and rusted beds, remnants of the institution's grim history. The air is heavy with the weight of the past, and the feeling of being watched is inescapable. But it's not just the decaying infrastructure that chills the bones at this place. The asylum boasts a family of actors who bring the horrors of its past to life. They portray the former staff and patients, their performances teetering on the edge of reality and fiction. You'll feel their anguish and torment, blurring the lines between history and horror. Well, that is if you make it out. One of these standout features is the infamous Mayflower Hall, known for its particularly intense paranormal activity. Here, visitors have reported unexplained phenomena ranging from whispers, shadowy figures, to unrelenting cold spots. Ooh, bother. It's a place where the veil between this world and the next seems disturbingly thin. As you navigate the nightmarish landscape, it's pretty easy to get lost in its dark history. The horrors you encounter are a reminder of the institution's grim past, where people were forgotten and suffering was the norm. Some say that those who disappear into Penhurst may never truly leave, their spirits forever bound to its haunted halls. In the end, it stands as a chilling testament to the horrors of the past and the terrors of the unknown. Eloise Psychiatric Hospital was a large complex located in Westland, Michigan that operated from 1839 to early 1982. It started out as a poorhouse and farm and eventually developed into an asylum, sanatorium, and hospital. It's had a lot of names over the years, so bear with me here. In 1832, it was called the Wayne County Poorhouse. In 1872, it was the Wayne County Almshouse. Well, in 1886, it was referred to simply as the Wayne County House. In 1913, there were three divisions: the Eloise Hospital, which housed, the mental hospital, the Eloise Infirmary, or the poorhouse, and the Eloise Sanatorium, which housed patients with tuberculosis, and all three were collectively called Eloise. Oh, that's not the end of the name changes. In 1945, it was named Wayne County General Hospital and Infirmary at Eloise, Michigan, which, bit of a mouthful. By 1974, it had two divisions, separating the Wayne County Psychiatric Hospital from the General Hospital. By 1979, it was officially called Wayne County General Hospital, with the Psychiatric Division closing in '82. In its heyday, Eloise was made up of 78 buildings on 902 acres with 10,000 patients along with 2,000 staff, serving as the largest psychiatric facility in the United States. Only the firehouse, power plant, commissary, and D buildings still stand as of right now, as well as the cemetery. It had some good things back in the day, housing the first kidney dialysis unit in the entire state of Michigan and pioneering the use of music therapy, but they also used, hydrotherapy, shock therapy, and insulin therapy to treat patients. As the years went on, the institution grew larger and larger, which was a reflection in the increases of population in the area. From only 35 residents in 1989, the complex grew to about 10,000 residents at its peak during the Great Depression. Now to talk about the ghosties. My favorite part. Numerous typical poltergeist activities have been witnessed within the complex, with doors slamming and medical carts and tables being overturned. Generally speaking, there are shadow figures that seemingly drip from the ceilings and ooze from the walls of this place, becoming part of the building itself until they are one and the same. Two ghostly little ones have been seen running the paint-peeling walls of the hallways, turning a corner only to disappear. It's assumed they were inmates at the time Eloise was a poorhouse, where orphans often lived until they were adopted out or passed away. Possibly they died in their youth, or maybe they just relived their lives now without the fear that they had when they were alive. Carelessly playing games in a kind of purgatory. Now there's a mysterious lady that appears as a white vapor and has been seen manifesting within one of the buildings that still stand, and her voice has been recorded as she whispers, "Help." Another ghost is that of a doctor said to prowl the halls of the crumbling facility, and even in the afterlife, he searches for an unfortunate patient to practice his scientific methods. Some have reported seeing a specter drenched in water, possibly a reminder of when hydrotherapy was coming into popularity. Other times, the phantasm is seen wearing a smock stained in red, presumably from a lobotomy. Yoicks! Possibly the doctor lingers, tormented by the ghosts of the patients upon whom he practiced. Nowadays, this building is home to 2 different escape rooms, which is super duper fun. So if you feel like risking the ghost's wrath, that's on you. Good luck making it out. Number 1. The Winchester Mystery House. So the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California is a labyrinth masterpiece of incredible architecture and paranormal intrigue. Its story begins with Sarah Winchester, the widow of the inventor of the famous Winchester rifle. Legend has it that she believed the spirits of those killed by the rifle were haunting her, and her response was to embark on an unceasing construction project that lasted for decades. The house itself is a bewildering marvel, a maze of staircases that lead to nowhere, doors that open into walls, and windows that peer into adjacent rooms. Its design is an enigma, with the hallways doubling back on themselves and secret passages hidden behind bookshelves. But what makes the Winchester Mystery House truly spine-chilling are the rumors of hauntings. Visitors have reported ghostly apparitions, eerie footsteps, and unexplained cold spots. The layout adds to the unease, as one can easily become disoriented within its winding corridors. One of the most famous rooms in the mansion is the Seance Room, where Sarah herself is said to have communicated with the spirits. It's a place of both fascination and fear, with its ornate details and otherworldly purpose. Over the years, countless tales of visitors and employees experiencing unexplained phenomena at the house have added to its mystique. Some believe that Sarah's quest to appease vengeful spirits has left a lasting imprint on the mansion, making it a hotbed of paranormal activity. It's a place where the boundary between the living and the dead blurs. The Winchester Mystery House is a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the human fascination with the supernatural. After a 2-year hiatus from hosting Halloween events, they've been heavily promoting their latest attraction in time for this spooky season. And with a title like Unhinged Housewarming, it promises to be their scariest yet.
Number 5. Bangar Fort. Now, if you Google Bangar Fort, if you're planning a trip up there anytime soon, almost every result will give you back something like India's most notorious or India's most haunted, so maybe that should give you a bit of a sense as to what's going on here. It's bad news. In fact, the place is said to be so filled to bursting with malevolent spirits that the Indian government actually restricts tourists from visiting after sunset for fear of spiritual danger. Let's take a look at the history of the Bangar Fort, one of the most notorious haunted places in India if the search engine is anything to go by. The fort was first built in the 17th century, and according to local legends, a religious ascetic lived nearby to the fort and insisted that any house built near the fort shouldn't be taller than its own house. Not sure why, but he just didn't want to be upstaged, I guess. If the shadow of any house fell on his own, he would destroy the fort, he threatened. When columns were added to the fort that casted a shadow, the fort was destroyed and abandoned seemingly overnight. Now, a variant of this legend suggests that a priest who practiced black magic and was a practitioner of the occult was in love with a princess who lived in the fort. He offered her a love elixir, and when she refused his proposal, he cursed the entire village, condemning it to be damned by the spirits for eternity. Locals claim that walking by the Bangar Fort, you can hear women screaming and crying from within at night, and strange otherworldly music can be heard playing seemingly from nowhere. Other residents claim that they see shadowy wisps or ethereal lights coming out of the fort's structure, alongside strange smells? What does a ghost smell like, I wonder? You know what? Don't let me know. That's maybe one that's better left not knowing. The reason for the ban after sunset is because local legends say that any person who enters the fort during the night will never be seen again and will become one of the spirits trapped inside. So maybe just stay within the guidelines and follow the signs just this once. And if you're looking for more videos about haunted hotspots, alien sightings, cryptids, creepy crawlies, and basically just about anything scary under the sun and above it, well, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click on through, subscribe, stay scared, and don't miss a single scream. But do that after you finish watching this video, okay? We worked hardish on it. Number 4. Tunnel 33. Shimla is said to be one of the most beautiful cities in the entire country of India and happens to also be home to some of the more haunted hotspots. Now, this one in particular might not be as scary as some of the other ones in this list. I thought maybe I'd give you a little break before we really got into it. But this ghost has been described as a lot friendlier than your average spirit, more of a Casper, if you will. Tunnel 33 is the longest tunnel in the Calcutta-Shimla railway track, built in the late 18th century in 1898. British railway engineer Colonel Balrog was the man in charge of constructing the project. Colonel Balrog, I'm pretty sure he was a Street Fighter character. Colonel Balrog was given a thin deadline and he failed to meet expectations for the tunnel, leading to him being humiliated in his career after the British government was understandably pretty upset with him. Distraught, completely despondent, he ended up taking his own life and was buried near the incomplete tunnel on the railroad tracks, where his spirit has remained ever since. Residents report seeing apparitions of the good colonel through the tunnel, sometimes saying they see him standing, admiring his work, riding his horse, or if you really believe some of the more out there stories, he's even been seen talking to tourists and locals as they pass through, asking questions about his tunnel and if the project is going well or if they're meeting deadlines. The poor guy is still so focused on his work all these years later. Take a break, man, for us, please. A phantasmal 15. You've earned it. There's something very sad about a ghost who's stuck on the land he worked on, unable to move on. He's not interested in haunting or scaring anyone, but just doomed to check in on a project he never got to see completed. If you ever visit the accursed tunnel, and if you happen to see the Colonel, tell him thank you, won't you? For me, okay? Tell him that the tunnel looks great and he did a good job. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. Number 3. Raoji Film City. Raoji Film City is one of the biggest film sets in the country. In fact, it's actually one of the largest film complexes in the entire world. I mean, it's a film city. How many other film cities are there really? It's a big attraction for movie lovers who come the world over to see its extravagant displays and exhibits, but also entices paranormal hunters looking for proof of the other world. And there's a little something for everyone here, you know? It's a real family place. So where does the haunting come from? Do the ghosts just love the silver screen? Well, Raoji Film City was allegedly built on an old Nizam battleground. The Nizam of Hyderabad was the ruling caste of the area in the 18th century. Now, if these stories are true and it is built on an old battlefield, then it makes sense that there would be a good amount of lingering evil and restless spirits trapped in the soil that haven't moved on. Dying violently tends to make ghosts. Guests of the film city claim that while visiting, lights will flicker and turn on and off at random. Now that could be bad wiring, but it also could be troublesome spirits. Where things get kinda spooky is the reports of crew members on film sets getting injured under mysterious circumstances, equipment malfunctioning, or outright being destroyed in front of people's very eyes. And these are some of the more common reports of things happening on the cursed set. Women in particular have felt targeted by the ghosts or spirits in the Raoji Film City. Actresses have claimed that they felt like they were being watched in their green rooms or even feeling a supernatural tugging at their clothes during filming. Now, I'm sure they make all kinds of genres of movie at the Raoji Film City, but if you want my professional advice, I think they should definitely consider filming a horror movie there. It sounds like they would save a ton on the special effects budget, or maybe they could make a documentary. Do you need to pay a ghost if you're gonna have a ghost in a movie? Do ghosts still have the same workers' rights? Somebody look into that for me. Number 2, the Charleville Mansion. We're headed back to Shimla for this next one. It sounds like if you're booking a trip to India to take in the sights and the spirits, Shimla is the number 1 place to be. Beautiful and filled with ghosts. Once you're done checking out the tunnel, take a trip to the Charleville Mansion, said to be the home to an old poltergeist. It's a century-old abandoned fort built during the British rule, and its first owner was a British officer whose name has seemingly been lost to time. Probably something like Wilford Brimley, though that's a different guy. When the officer and his wife moved into the mansion in 1913, they were unaware of the rumors surrounding it, and they just thought they were getting a great deal on rent. A previous owner had already fled the property because of the hauntings that had taken place. They say that there was a ghostly figure that would slowly apparate in the middle of the night and would smash objects and throw them around the house. Now, despite this house being haunted, the officer himself didn't personally believe in ghosts. He wanted to test this theory of whether or not there was a poltergeist in his home, and so he locked all of the doors in his house and waited. Just sat there twiddling his thumbs, tapping his feet, waiting for a ghost to approach. Well, lo and behold, after locking all the doors, he heard a crash upstairs and ran upstairs, opened the door, and found that this one room had all of the furniture and all of the mirrors just utterly demolished. I think he moved out the same week. They say he moved out shortly after, but I can't even imagine he finished packing his bags. Now, the next owner was one Victor Bailey, an assistant secretary working on the railway construction at the time, and I gotta say, there must be some really bad vibes at the Shimla Railway if 2 entries on this list involve it. Anyway, the Baileys moved into the mansion, and at first it seemed like a great deal. Beautiful mansion secluded away from the rest of the world. Until one day at a dinner party, one of their guests reported that he was talking to a lovely English gentleman. Victor Bailey was a bit confused, and when he went back to go introduce himself to this guest, he watched the man disappear into the room the poltergeist destroyed, just vanished out of thin air, and the Baileys packed their bags and left shortly after. The mansion is now deserted and is a hotspot for paranormal activity, so enter if you dare. I actually don't even know if you can go in. Look into that maybe. Number 1. Dumas Beach. We all love a good beach vacation. If you're looking for somewhere sweet to lay back while sipping on something sweet, India is full of some beautiful beaches. But we are not here to talk about anything lovely, okay? This isn't top 5 lovely, although that would be just delightful. I would love to work on top 5 lovely if we're ever gonna make that a channel. Maybe you guys are listening. We're going to Dumas Beach, located along the Arabian Sea in Gujarat. The first thing you'll notice about this beach that stands out is the black sand, which is already pretty unnerving. Most beaches don't look like that. The local folklore says that Dumas Beach used to be a burial ground for Hindu people, and as such, generations of spirits are ingrained into the sand. Building on this legend says that the reason for the obsidian-colored sand is years worth of cremated ash by the burning of the dead, eventually overtaking the sand on the beach. So, I don't know, if you're thinking about making a sand castle, maybe think twice about that. Maybe keep the flip-flops on too, okay? So what do people say about the spirits out there? Well, it's been said there's a negative aura present in the air, and even just while visiting, tourists and residents say they can feel this sense of dread that something is wrong immediately walking around there. Locals say that the spirits of the dead walk down the beach at night, and visitors claim to hear inexplicable voices, scary laughter, and crying. So if you want a nice, long, romantic walk down the beach in India, just keep in mind that you're gonna have a bit of an audience with you. Some people go so far as to say that there's been apparition, floating orbs seen around the beach, so I was having a bit of trouble finding any photos of any ghost sightings around the beach. People say dogs behave strangely, walking through it, howling and barking. There are some who believe that the animals can see spirits we can't, and this could be evidence of that. Now, the most extreme legends say that the tourists go missing around midnight on the beach, but I want to believe if people kept going missing on a beach, they'd shut it down, but I don't know. I've seen Jaws, I know that's not actually that likely.
Number 5 on this list is the Leap Castle. The Leap Castle is located in Ireland and is just a setting for a movie waiting to happen. CN Traveler says, built somewhere between the 13th and late 15th century, this Irish castle has seen more gruesome deaths than a Game of Thrones wedding. As legend has it, during a struggle for power within the O'Carroll clan, which had a fondness for poisoning dinner guests, by the way, one brother plunged a sword into another, a priest, as he was holding mass in the castle's chapel. The room is now called the Bloody Chapel, and the priest is said to haunt the church at night. And the horror doesn't end there. During castle renovations in the early 1900s, workmen found a secret dungeon in the Bloody Chapel with so many human skeletons they filled 3 cartloads when they hauled away. The dungeon was designed so that prisoners would fall through a trap door, have their lungs punctured by wooded spikes on the ground, and die a slow, horrific death within earshot of the sinister clan members above. Man, people really were nuts back then. Like, think about the dude who designed that kill chamber, putting down all the spikes, arranging them in such a fashion that they wouldn't kill somebody right away, but give them just enough time to feel the sheer agony of it all and hear a bunch of their enemies having dinner above them. Obviously, because of all of this, this castle is right up there as being one of the most haunted in the world. The ghosts of those who died in this chamber are said to haunt those who stop by. Their spirits are filled with rage and anger, and they want to take it out on all the people who come here. Like, this sucks, because it would be kind of interesting to tour this castle, but at the same point, I don't know if I even blame these guys. Like, if I had to die like that, then I feel as if I'd be a pretty bitter ghost about things as well. Number 4 on this list is the Husa Castle. This is right up there as being a castle to hell, if you ask me. CN Traveler says, located about an hour north of Prague, Husa Castle has no fortifications, no kitchen, and had no occupants when it was built. It does, however, have something within its walls that no other castle in the world has. A large hole in the ground that many consider to be the gateway to hell. Husa was strategically built over the hole, which is fabled to be bottomless, to seal up the gateway and keep demonic creatures from entering our world. The demons are said to be trapped in the walls of the lower level. Here's where the story gets really creepy though. Before sealing it off, nearby prisoners were granted pardons if they would agree to be lowered into the hole by a rope and report back what they saw. When the first prisoner was lowered, he started screaming after a few seconds. When he was raised back up, the story goes, he appeared to have aged 30 years. So there is literally a gateway to hell here in this castle. That is so freaking cool and at the same point, so freaking scary. Think about how many demons and ghouls must be running around this place all the time. The devil, for all we know, might claim this castle as his own and show up here regularly. And then there's the whole story with the prisoner. How in the hell did that happen? He gets lowered down and then seconds later raised back up only to be 30 years older? I wonder if this indicates to us that time moves a lot faster in hell. Or maybe he lived 30 entire years in hell in the short time that it took us to reel him back up. Can you imagine 30 years in hell just dangling by a rope? That would be, well, that would be hell. Number 3 in this list is the Vargard Castle. This place has seen things, guys. CN Traveler says, in the northeastern Danish town of Dronninglund, Vargard Castle displays works by Raphael, Goya, and El Greco to the public. But the stately building is also as renowned for its dark past. The most famous myth tells the story of Ingeborg Skeel, who acquired the castle in 1578 and drowned its architect in the moat so that he could never design another building as beautiful as Vargard. People today report seeing Skeel's tormented ghost wandering through the castle at night dressed in white. Even if you don't believe in ghost stories, you might still get goosebumps passing by Rosdenton, Vargard's most infamous dungeon. The room was designed so that an adult man can neither stand up straight nor lie stretched out, and there are no holes for light or air either. Ingeborg Skeel. What a freaking name, eh? Kinda sounds a bit like a robot, but I guess that was a human being back in the day. Also, let's take a moment and actively think about that dungeon there. So you can't stand up, but you also can't lie down, and there are no holes for light or air. Think about how horrible it would be to go in there. It'd just be a tiny little box. Like, getting put inside that thing would be the torture. You wouldn't need to do anything else to the person. This place's dark history has made it one of the most haunted spots in Denmark, which is really too bad because, as CN Traveler described, the castle itself is remarkably beautiful. Number 2 on this list is Caloma. Now, I had to talk about this one because it's actually located in Toronto, Canada, and I have personally been to this castle before myself. CN Traveler says there is a Gothic revival style castle in Midtown Toronto that, whether you realize it or not, you almost certainly have seen. On screen, that is. Caloma has made appearances in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, X-Men, Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast, and as Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This is partly because of the mansion's distinct architectural qualities, but also because of its legend. There are decades worth of reported ghost sightings, including the spirit of Sir Henry Pallet, its original inhabitant, and his wife Lady Mary, for whom the castle was built. Even more frequently seen is the apparition of a maid from the early 1900s when 60,000 people in Toronto died of the flu. Now, I personally cannot attest to the ghostly sightings. I only went there once, and I went right in the middle of the day when there were tons of other people around, so didn't really get a chance to see anything too spooky. What I can speak on, though, is the tunnels. There are a ton of deep and long winding tunnels in this castle. They are all creepy as holy hell, and I imagine that they've seen their fair share of death. I can't actively tell you not to go to this place, considering I personally have been myself, but I will say to tread with caution.
Number 5, Union Graveyard. This specific cemetery is located near Stepney Road in Easton, Connecticut, and dates back to the 1700s. According to ghost hunters, it is one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire United States. The most popular ghostie is the elusive White Lady, popularized partially thanks to Ed Warren having an obsession with her and possibly catching footage of her. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, so my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up at quite the distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brake, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no sign of bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing. Now, Lorraine Warren used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the white lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m., which was his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have proof, and described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he thought were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Now, the Warrens have also referenced a red eyes ghost, so a pair of red eyes which they claimed can be seen in the forest behind the cemetery, not to be confused with bike reflectors that locals have placed within the grounds to scare teens. The famous duo claimed the eyes belonged to Earl Kellogg, a man who was set on fire across the street in 1935. Number 4. Highgate Cemetery. Highgate Cemetery is located in North London, England, and was designed by architect Stephen Geary. There are approximately 170,000 people buried in around 53,000 graves across the West and East cemeteries for context, and today's tale has to do with vampires. In 1967, two teenage girls were walking home along the nearby Swains Lane and claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking in the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News on November 2nd, the teens arranged flowers taken from graves in circular patterns with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. And by that I mean a coffin was opened and the body inside was disturbed. But their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6 of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a gray figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's gray figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being a king of the vampires or practicing black magic. See, king of the vampires? That's my kind of guy. A rivalry grew between David and Sean, with each claiming that he could and would expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared that he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th of March, which, you know, it's a good spooky date for that sort of thing. ITV conducted interviews with both men, and others who claimed to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of the 13th, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond had swarmed over the gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to get them the heck out of there. Some months later, on August 1st of 1970, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found not far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. There was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. The vampire is said to lurk until this day, so maybe I'll have to make a trip eventually to pay my respects, if you get what I mean. Number 3. Hollywood Forever. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery is one of the oldest in the state of California and is located on Santa Monica Boulevard. Many famous individuals are buried in the cemetery, such as Rudolph Valentino, Mickey Rooney, Anton Yelchin, and Judy Garland. First used in 1899, it features well over 50 acres of land for families and visitors. There are still thousands of spaces available and new mausoleums being completed, but it's time to talk about the ghosties. It should also be noted that Paramount Studios is located near the cemetery, and it is said to be one of the most haunted movie studios of all time. So let me know if y'all want me to ever elaborate on that. I'll start with the obvious, and I think the most dedicated fan ever, the Woman in Black. Also, yes, my bias for unknown ghostly ladies, known only by their outfits, is coming into play. This is why I choose to always dress up, because I'd personally hate for my last outfit to be my raggedy PJs. What do you think? Would this be a good final resting outfit? If not, I'm open to suggestions. Rudolph had passed away at the age of 31 in 1926 after surgery from an ulcer, and over 100,000 people gathered outside the funeral home. Fun fact, there were rumors that a wax replica was used to protect the body at the service. He was quite the popular heartthrob at the time. Heck, I'm racking my brain for like a modern day equivalent, and I'm failing. Just imagine your celebrity crush, but everyone also liked that same crush to a crazy level. It wasn't until after he had been laid to rest that the woman in black began to appear, and mainly she likes to come out on the anniversary of his death, dressed from head to toe in black, including a veil. She would leave roses on the grave and was originally thought to be Pola Negri, the woman he was engaged to during the time of his death, but nope. Many women have come forward claiming they are the woman in black. However, none of these claims have turned out to be true. Alrighty, ghostie number 2, Miss Virginia Rappy. On Labor Day in 1921, Virginia had attended a party for Mr. Roscoe Arbuckle at the St. Francis Hotel, which was held to celebrate acquiring a very large contract. Sadly, at that very party, Virginia had become sick and mysteriously passed a few days later at only 26 years old. Now, many claims were made surrounding her death, including the possibility of Arbuckle taking sexual advantage of her, a claim that was later proven false but sadly had negatively affected his career. No one knows exactly what happened to her on that fateful Labor Day. Around the site of Virginia's grave, folks have reported the temperature dropping to an icy cold climate, and have also heard what appears to be sobbing. Many believe that she is still dealing with this traumatic event, with many visitors clearly seeing her weeping on the edge of water that is located on the grounds. I'm sure there are plenty of other ghosties, so let me know if anyone knows of any that I might have forgotten. Number 2, Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Chicago, this cemetery is the home of a very well-known ghostie, Resurrection Mary, who is also commonly referred to as BLOODY Mary. Blame the interwebs for the spelling out. Has different origins, depending on who's telling the story, but the most shared narratives put her untimely death sometime in the late 1920s to early 1930s, when she was either a victim of a fatal car crash on the way to a night of dancing, or the unfortunate victim of a hit-and-run accident while she was walking home in the rain. Most documented reports of Mary describe her as a young, fashionable blonde woman, no older than mid-20s, wearing a white ball gown, accessories, and a hairstyle to match. The first person who claimed to encounter Resurrection Mary was a man named Jerry Palace. In 1939, Jerry was at a popular dance hall when he was love-struck by a young blonde woman. He approached her, and the two hit it off and spent the night dancing away, even sharing a scandalous kiss. According to Jerry, her hands were as cold as ice, but he had a warm heart that made up for it. So, eventually, closing time came around, and Jerry offered the woman a ride home, and she asked to be taken down Archer Avenue. She motioned for Jerry to stop in front of the Resurrection Cemetery, and when he did, she got out and vanished before his eyes. Jerry was shaken with disbelief, but not too frightened to seek out answers. The next morning, he made his way to the address where Mary said she lived, over in Southside. He knocked on the door and encountered her mother. Now, when Jerry asked about the woman he had met the previous night, she informed him that she'd been dead for nearly 3 years. It turned out that, yep, Jerry had encountered Resurrection Mary, and over the next few decades, several other men would have similar experiences. But that was the one that began the legend. One cab driver in the 1970s claimed to see a young woman standing in front of the Resurrection Cemetery one night, and he pulled over to check to see if she needed a ride, and as the woman approached the vehicle, yep, she disappeared. Another encounter with Mary occurred in 1979 when a separate cab driver named Ralph claimed to pick up a young female hitchhiker he believed to be no older than 21. As the two drove up Archer Avenue, she suddenly jumped up and said, "Here, here." The car came to a sudden stop, and the woman pointed to a small abandoned shack off of the left side of the road. Now, Ralph questioned whether this was actually where she wanted to go, but before he got an answer, she disappeared without ever opening the door of his cab. His encounter was detailed in a 1979 issue of Suburban Trip magazine, and in 1980, Claire Rudnicki and her husband Mark were driving down Archer Avenue towards the cemetery when they spotted a young woman in a white gown slowly walking down the side of the road. Now, it was immediately obvious that she wasn't an ordinary person, as she was partially transparent with a white aura around her, almost as if she was glowing. Shocked, the couple wondered if they had just seen a ghost, and when they once again reached the spot where Mary was walking, you guessed it, she was gone. Mary is supposedly buried at this cemetery in Justice, Illinois, about a 30-minute drive southwest of Chicago, and it gives her stomping grounds as well as her iconic name. She likes to stick to that particular stretch of road on Archer Avenue, between the cemetery and what was once the O. Henry Ballroom in Willow Springs. Over the years, several researchers have tried to determine the exact identity of Mary, but no one knows. Due to the number of sightings and the credibility of those who claim to see her, Resurrection Mary is said to be one of Chicago's most famous ghosts. Number 1, Stull Cemetery. Stull Cemetery and the abandoned church that that rests next to it is located in the tiny, nearly forgotten Kansas town of Stull. Oh, and it's believed to be one of the 7 portals to hell. Though counted among the most haunted cemeteries in the world, Stull Cemetery has gained a haunted reputation due to a legend that involves Satan. The legends say that these stories have been linked to Stull for more than 100 years, but none of them made it into print until the 1970s. Specifically, in November of 1974, an article appeared in the University of Kansas student newspaper that spoke of a number of strange occurrences in the Stull churchyard. According to the article, Stull was haunted by legends of diabolical, supernatural happenings, and the legends claimed that the cemetery was one of the 2 places on Earth where the devil appears in person 2 times each year. Apparently, most students learned of Stull's diabolical reputation from their grandparents, or, other older individuals, but that many of them claimed first-hand encounters with things that could not be explained. One student claimed to have been grabbed by the arm by something unseen, while others spoke of unexplained memory loss when visiting the place. The legends also say that the devil has been appearing here since the 1850s, and insists that the original name of the town was Skull, and that the later corruption into that of Stull was simply to cover the fact that the area was steeped in black magic.
Coming in at number 5, we have Bod, California. Located up in the Bod Hills in Mono County, California near Yosemite, in 1859 4 miners found a good place to look for gold in the hills near the California-Nevada border. Bod died in a blizzard not long after, but a small mining town sprung up at their camp. The town was home to 10,000 people. Bod was a mining camp in 1859 where people had seen gold in its hills. Eventually it turned to a well-populated town. Though, like most mining towns, it saw its peak, its losses, and then its decline. Fast forward to 1962 and the town would be fully abandoned, although it already showed signs of decline with dwindling numbers at the start of the 20th century. A series of fires forced the last remaining residents to flee the town, leaving it almost exactly as it was in the early 1900s. Dinner tables are still set up, shops are still stocked with supplies, and restaurants are still poised to serve long-forgotten meals. Today, the 110 silent buildings sit spaced out for traffic and people that aren't there. Buildings such as a barbershop, a church, a mill, a morgue, and a leaning hotel is held up by a beam have been left untouched for 100 years. Though since it has been left and abandoned for years, some of the buildings are in crumbling state of decay, while others stand strong, full of their original items but long devoid of their owners. There were also 16 saloons and thus a fair amount of danger. People were robbed and crimes occurred quite often, though the curse of Bod has nothing to do with the fires or the shootings. It started because people started taking artifacts from the abandoned buildings. They take weather-worn shoes or pieces of glass from shattered windows. Somebody once ran off with a piano. Those items may seem like they have no value, but all objects carry equal significance in telling the story of Bod. Thus, the curse of Bod emerged, where if you take something from Bod, bad luck will come around to get you. Because of the rumor spreading of a curse, people who stole items would send them back, often including heartfelt apology letters explaining that they didn't expect their fish to pass, or their romantic life to tank from stealing from Bod. Coming in at number 4, we have Bangar, Montana. The once bright star of Montana is now a ruin, a town in arrested decay, with few remaining storefronts, saloons, and hotels. The town was founded in 1862 when a group of Pikes Peakers from the goldfields of Colorado set up camp on the banks of the creek. Finding gold, the miners staked claims and promptly failed to keep the find a secret. By the spring of 1863, the area boasted a population of 5,000. By 1864, Bannock had started to fade, losing importance. The remnants of the past still exist with empty buildings and weathered wood. Today, over 60 structures remain standing, most of which can be explored. The town is known as a site for paranormal activity. It is known that ghosts of the abandoned town walk the streets of Bannock. The most common ghost story, though, is the story of Dorothy Dunn. In August 1916, Dorothy Dunn, her cousin Fern, and a friend waded into a dredge pond and stepped into deep water, but none of the 3 knew how to swim. Luckily, a passerby was able to save both Fern and the friend, but Dorothy was not as lucky. Today, the site of the tragic drowning is referred to as Dorothy's Hole. Sometime after the accident, Bertie saw a ghost of her friend upstairs in the hotel of the town. She recognized Dorothy by her long blue dress. Although Bertie rarely discussed the sightings, other visitors began to report seeing the spirit of a young girl in a long blue dress in the window of the hotel. Others have reported cold spots, and some have reported trying to speak to the girl in a long blue dress. Bannock was filled with adult workers, crimies, murders, and of course the notorious sheriff and outlaw Henry Plummer, whose vast gang terrorized and robbed southwest Montana for years. Henry Plummer was handsome, well-dressed, and charismatic. He was also able to gain the trust of the area miners and was soon elected sheriff of the community. However, little did the citizens citizens of Bannock know, but their new sheriff led a secret band of road agents called the Innocents, who began to terrorize the travelers between Bannock and Virginia City, robbing and ending more than 100 men over the next several months. Once caught for his terrible actions, Henry Plummer met his fatal end at the hands of the town's citizens. Today, many say that the ghost of Henry Plummer haunts this old settlement. Perhaps he wants to avenge his name. In at number 3 we have Thurman, West Virginia. The historic town of Thurman, located in the heart of New River Gorge, was established by Captain William D. Thurman in the 1880s. Captain Thurman passed in 1910, but the town continued its growth. During its height in the 1920s, the town was flourishing with a number of businesses and facilities in the railway industry. Thurman had 2 banks, 2 hotels, stores, a cinema and offices, yet after a series of setbacks, Thurman soon went from boom to bust. A number of factors played a role in the town's slow decline. The first problem was the increased rail competition and the emergence of cars. Then in 1930, a fire that led to the closure of the biggest hotel in the town, the Dunglen Hotel, only furthered the decline. The final fate of the town was the Great Depression, and by 1950 Thurman was a ghost town. Thurman saw a small revival during World War II when coal was in high demand, but it was not enough. Afterward, the coal fields began to play out. Today, Thurman stands at just 5-person population, which is why it is nearly vacant ghost town, as the remaining residents either move on or pass away. The house and the land it sits on became the property of the National Park Service. Walking around Thurman today is a sad reminder of the countless other boom towns which once thrived with human activity, but today are silent and forgotten. Many buildings have long since disappeared, either torn down or, as in the case of the well-loved hotel, burnt to the ground in suspicious circumstances. Many of the family homes lie in increasingly decaying condition, while some have disappeared altogether, leaving only behind a white picket fence and wildflowers which still blossom untended each year. The eerie atmosphere of Thurman led many visitors to believe that this almost abandoned town is haunted. In at number 2 we have Cahaba Ghost Town. Alabama is home to many small towns. While some of these towns have very few residents, others are true ghost town because they've been completely abandoned. It's no secret that small abandoned towns give off an eerie vibe. As a matter of fact, one Alabama ghost town in particular that fits the bill is Old Cahaba. The small town of Old Cahaba is located in Dallas County. From 1820 to 1826, this small town served as Alabama's first state capital. Before the Civil War, Cahaba was a busy trade city located at the junction of the Alabama and Cahaba rivers. Over the years, floods and decay have affected this historical town. Thus, by 1900, the town was completely abandoned. Today, Old Cahaba is Alabama's most famous ghost town. Many buildings still stand, like the church, schoolhouse, and some houses. However, they have been left untouched for decades. You can still walk the streets of Cahaba and see the ruins and abandoned buildings, but make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the ghostly orbs that have been reported to appear in the garden maze at the home of C.C. Peggs. Additionally, many locals share similar ghost stories from the ghost town. While it's known that Cahaba is filled with paranormal activity, one groundskeeper that works at the new Cahaba Cemetery has reported hearing voices as they worked. While tourist groups claim to have recordings of unusual sounds, and others say they've captured unexplained lights or shadows in photographs. Another site that's reportedly haunted is the Barker House. This mansion was built in 1860 by Stephen Barker and contained slave quarters behind the house. After people started leaving the town in 1870s, the house was bought by Samuel McGurdy Kirkpatrick. It burned in 1935 and was rebuilt, but today it's in pretty bad condition. The only people usually left inside are paranormal investigators. Reports from said investigators include seeing a ball rolling across the floor on its own and a stuffed animal appearing to communicate with something else in the room. But the most well-known haunting in Cahaba is Peggs' ghost. Colonel Christopher Claudius Peggs was the leader of the 5th Alabama Regiment and was wounded leading a charge at the Battle of Seven Pines in Virginia in May 1862. He died from his wounds 2 months later, on July 15th. As the story goes, a couple were walking behind Peggs' home in the spring of 1862. As they walked, they spotted a ball of light. They tried to touch it, but their hands went right through it. It disappeared, but later came back and followed the couple. Due to all the mysterious crimes that happened in association to Peggs, seeing an orb around his former house is considered a bad omen and possibly even a supernatural warning. And finally, in at number 1 we have Centralia, Pennsylvania. Located in a quiet valley of Columbia County, Pennsylvania, is one of the state's least likely and least publicized tourist attractions. Centralia, Pennsylvania, once thriving with 14 active coal mines and 2,500 residents in the early 20th century. But But by the 1960s, its thriving business and population hit a decline, and most of its mines were abandoned. Still at that point, over 1,000 people still resided in the town, and Centralia was far from dying until a coal mine fire began below. In 1962, a fire started in a landfill and spread to the never-ending coal tunnels that miners dug thousands of feet below the surface. And despite repeated attempts to extinguish the flames, the fire still burns to this day. 20 years after the fire started, however, Centralia, Pennsylvania began to feel the effects of its underground fire, as residents started passing out in their homes from carbon monoxide poisoning. The trees began to die and the ground turned to ash. Roads and sidewalks began to buckle. But some residents didn't want to leave despite the health risks, and for the next 10 years, legal battles and personal arguments between neighbors became the norm. The local newspaper even published a weekly list of who was leaving. Finally, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain in 1993, by which point only 63 residents remained. Officially, they became squatters in houses they had owned for decades. In 2013, the remaining residents, which were fewer than 10, won a settlement against the state. Each was awarded $349,500 and ownership of their properties until they die, at which point Pennsylvania will seize the land and finally demolish what structures remain.
Coming in number 5, we've got the Los Feliz Murder Mansion. Also a great name for an instrumental math rock band or maybe a spooky improv group. Feel free to use it as long as you invite me to the first show. The Los Feliz Murder Mansion is exactly what it sounds like. A mansion in Los Feliz where somebody was murdered. It goes further than that, as the circumstances surrounding the murder are quite grisly indeed. In the late 50s, this house belonged to Dr. Harold Perelson, a family man with a successful career. Those last two bits were just for show though, as there was plenty of darkness hidden beneath the veneer of respectability. On one fateful night, he decided enough was enough and found his trusty hammer. Using this carpentry tool as an improvised weapon, he ended the life of his wife in brutal fashion. One attack wasn't enough either, as Dr. Perelson went after his daughter as well. Thankfully, he wasn't able to finish her off, but she was still gravely injured. Realizing what he had done, he decided to drink enough acid to burn through his insides and send him on to the afterlife. Chilling, to say the least. What would drive a person to commit such an act? After this all became public knowledge, people avoided the home for a while. The place where something so horrid happened can't be comfortable to sit around in. However, after a while, a family bought up the property and used it largely for storage. That's probably a safer bet than actually living there, eh? In 2016, the place was cleared out and most of the remaining stuff was auctioned off. Then it sold in 2019 and someone new moved in. Maybe time did a nice revision and people forgot what had happened there. Although it doesn't seem as though the ghosts are very violent or surly. No, the hauntings here largely consist of things being moved around without anyone present. And speaking of present, there have also been reports of unexplainable Christmas gifts appearing around the house. Maybe these ghosts feel bad for how things went down and have decided to live a lovely family life once more. Interesting. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Marr residence. The older a building is, the more likely it is to be haunted, yeah? Can we accept that as a fact of life? Good, good. So it should stand to reason that the Marr residence, located in Saskatoon, is probably bursting at the seams with phantoms. This house was actually built way before the city even incorporated and is the longest standing building in the area. Of course it would accumulate some ghosts over the years. The main way folks might have ended up tethered to this home in the afterlife is through its use as a field hospital in 1885. Hospitals often find themselves creating many ghosts, as folks who suffer for extended periods of time or go before they're ready tend to stick around afterwards. The Marr residence also has a long history of different folks deciding to live there for a while, so any number of tenants may be haunting the halls. One ghost in particular causes a whole lot of issues. Appearing as an elderly, angry man, the phantom flies around, tormenting any woman who enter the house. Some things never change, eh? No matter what era you pull an angry dude from, he'll always find a way to harass some woman he doesn't know. Classic. So if you're really freaked out, don't worry. The Marr residence actually offers a virtual tour on the website, meaning you can shuffle around this creaky home without having to put yourself in the way of any spectral presences. They've also made an attempt to connect with all the cool youths out there by starting up a TikTok account. I can't vouch for its efficacy, but at least they're trying. Ghost stories in real life just don't have the same pull as online ones anymore. Interestingly enough, it seems to be a popular destination for weddings too, so if you really want, you can book your next event at the Marr residence. There might be more than one lady in white though, and nobody can really get mad at ghosts for upstaging a bride. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Morgan House. Another tale of familial terror, this house is situated in Kalimpong, India.
A husband-wife duo moved in, sharing the last name Morgan. Of course, that's where this house got its famous name. At first, all seemed well with this young couple. They kept up appearances, went about their daily chores, and ensured that all looked well. However, they were hiding a dark secret. Mr. Morgan supposedly tortured his wife behind closed doors, beating her and performing terrible acts. She had no way to leave him, so all she could do was endure. As time went on, the torture got worse, and Miss Morgan was desperate for a way out. She stopped seeing friends, ceased leaving the house, and eventually became a total shut-in. And after all that, it was too much. She took her own life, leaving Mr. Morgan to abandon the property. For decades, the house was left in this state, empty, dusty, and home to a ghost. But eventually, the Indian government stepped in and revitalized the structure, making it into a boutique hotel. The ghost story doesn't end there though. Guests at this hotel often hear the clicking of high heels and the sobbing of a woman in distress. Those who know the story of the Morgans understand that this is a sign that Miss Morgan is near, even all these years later. Coming in at number 2, we've got Casa de la Poesia, or the House of Poetry. That doesn't sound too spooky, but poets tend to be pretty morbid, don't you think? Once belonging to Colombian poet Jose Asuncion Silva, this was a place of tragedy. Silva lived a life largely void of pleasure or triumph. Although he did publish some wildly influential and successful poetry, a lot of what happened in his life surrounding his writing was very sad. His only friend, his sister, died too young, leaving him all alone. His best manuscripts were lost in a shipwreck, and his family fell upon hard times, resulting in economic ruin. Needless to say, this lonely poet wasn't a very happy individual. Eventually, after putting out enough work to support himself for a few years, Silva took his own life at the age of 30. After this, people began to hear whispers and shuffling from within the house, likely thanks to the ghost of Silva, a moody poet even in the afterlife. These days, the house is a museum. Guests come here for the poetry and the poltergeistery. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Velisa Axe Murder House. Now, most of the houses on this list are well known for having a spooky atmosphere and trying to make people afraid simply through backstories. However, visitors are often pleasantly surprised by how little harm they do. Ghosts have a tough time actually hurting folks after all. The Velisa Axe Murder House has spooky legends and horrifying repercussions in spades. Made famous for a gruesome string of murders back in the early 20th century, folks have always been a little afraid of this shack. No running water, no power, no hope. After the young family was famously murdered and no explanation was discovered, rumors of ghosts and ghouls proliferated. Even today, most paranormal enthusiasts don't seem to want to actually spend a night. In fact, one investigator did in 2014 and did his best to find out what he could. In the end, he only ended up with a self-inflicted stab wound. So be careful when dealing with this fascinating old home. Who knows what you might see, hear, or think. Who wants to put in an offer on one of these? With prices the way they are lately, it might be your last chance to be a homeowner before the fall of the empire. Roommates are almost a given these days, why not opt for a phantom roommate? They'll leave less dishes in the sink.
Coming in at number 5, we have Castle Stewart. Magnificently situated on the Moray Firth near Inverness, the 5-star Castle Stewart is a sight to behold. A mere 7 miles from the heart of Inverness, Castle Stewart is an ideally located base from which to explore the scenic and historic Highlands of Scotland. Walk the battlements with the ghost of Charles I before he lost his kingdom and his head, or with Bonnie Prince Charlie the night before his tragic defeat at nearby Culloden Moor. The property was held by the Macintoshes but was given by Mary, Queen of Scots, to James Stewart, Earl of Moray. Moray was made regent for James VI but was later assassinated. During the time that Stewart lived in the castle for an unknown reason, local residents began to spread the rumour that the castle was haunted. To disprove the theory, James Stewart offered a reward to anyone willing to spend a night in the castle. A local minister accepted the challenge and stayed in a room at the top of the East Tower. Stewart was hopeful that once the minister told the people that the tower was not haunted, the word of the castle being haunted would not spread. The next morning, however, he was found dead in the courtyard with a look of terror on his face. It was never explained what had happened to him and no killer was ever found. At some point in the night, he had either jumped from the window of the tower or he had been pushed. This only cemented the fear that the castle was in fact cursed. From that day, the locals refused to enter the castle grounds. It lay dormant for around 300 years until it was refurbished and turned into the hotel that we know today. Guests who have stayed there since it reopened have experienced a number of hauntings. Staff have heard disembodied footsteps on the stairs at midnight, horrible screams, and the ghost of a headless man was seen prowling the corridors. Some people have seen a figure pass their window too fast for them to make sense of it, but caught a glimpse in their eye as if someone had fallen from the tower above. The reviews of the hotel prove that guests are convinced the hauntings are real, but they also claim to have enjoyed the stay. If you like being terrified by ancient spirits or tormented by lost souls, this might be the place for you. In at number 4 we have Chillingham Castle in Chillingham. Chillingham Castle is a 13th century stronghold famed for action and battles. With its fine rooms, gardens, lakes, fountains and tea rooms, the castle has an extraordinary ownership bloodline which runs back to the 1200s. Chillingham occupied a strategic position during Northumberland's bloody border feuds. Chillingham Castle was often under attack and often basked in the patronage of royal visitors, a tradition that remains to this day. Edward VIII came to hunt there, and members of today's royal family continue the tradition with private visits to the castle this century. The medieval castle remains as it was, just with galleries that you can see today added in Tudor days. For the visit of King James VI of Scotland, the castle is a dark past at the hands of the once owner John Sage. Once injured, he could no longer fight for the king. He begged to be kept on in some capacity. He was given the job of torturer and stepped into his new role with relish. It was said that he had a deep hatred for the Scots and little mercy, with over 7,500 men, women and children suffering an agonizing end at his hands. Often legs and arms were broken before they were thrown 20 feet down into the oubliette. With no way to escape, they were to eventually starve and pass away in pain and in fear. It was also said that John Sage met with an equally gruesome death after he accidentally killed a tribesman's daughter that he had been in love with. The father exacted his revenge and John was executed at Chillingham, with parts of his body being taken as souvenirs, a fitting end to a life dedicated to such cruelty. One of the most famous ghosts is the ghost of the Blue Boy, often witnessed by flashes of blue light or halo. These sightings settled down when two skeletons, one of a man and the other a young boy, were uncovered during renovation work. They even found documents with the remains dating back to the Armada. Who they were and why they were hidden remains a mystery. Some of the smaller hauntings guests reported including footsteps being heard walking around the rooms and the taps turning on by themselves. Another common sighting includes those of the Lady in White, who, after suffering from being poisoned, begged guests for water in the pantry. These are just a couple of the ghosts and hauntings around the castle. If you're brave enough to investigate, you might find a few more. In at number 3, the Swan Hotel in Suffolk. This luxury 4-star hotel is set in the middle of the historic Tudor town of Lavenham. In the heart of Suffolk, its oak-beamed interior makes for a cozy feel, giving guests a sense of stepping back in time. It's said that a housekeeper who once lived there back when the hotel was a thriving coaching inn back in the 19th century fell pregnant out of wedlock. The baby's father was happy to marry the lady under the circumstances and promised to look after them both. However, on the wedding day the gentleman had second thoughts and left the pregnant lady standing at the altar. Savage. It is said that after that she became inconsolable and very depressed. What is now room 15 in the Swan Hotel was once the housekeeping quarters, and it is said that the poor woman was found hanging in this room by one of the inn's workers. Her ghost remains behind to chill the spines of those that dared to cross her path. A security guard was working alone late one night at the Swan Hotel, and as he was doing his final checks around the hotel, he came into contact with her, which scared him out of his wits and sent him running in the other direction. Several guests have reported having seen her standing in room 15 in the middle of the night. Once a nun was staying in that very room when she awoke, startled to feel the ghost tickling her feet. I guess you either get lucky and she likes you, or she chooses to scare you half to death. In at number 2 we have the Langham in London. One of the more upmarket entries on this list is the Langham in London. I know it's upmarket because Cher stayed there. How do I know? Because I stalk her life. Since opening in 1865, this 5-star hotel has played host to a number of infamous historical figures, both living and dead. With nearly 500 rooms and suites, it's really not surprising that a number of ghosts have been seen regularly at the hotel. The paranormal activity at the hotel became apparent when it was owned by the BBC, when it was discovered that there were at least 5 ghosts that make regular appearances at the hotel. The most active of the ghosts at the hotel is said to be that of a German prince or nobleman who was thought to have met his death when he threw himself out of the window of an upper story room. Ghosts have seen his ghostly form moving through walls and closed doors, and he is often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Room 333 is supposed to be the most haunted. In this room, a BBC newscaster woke up to see a fluorescent ball of light which slowly took a human shape. The apparition hovered 2 feet above the floor, the lower portion of its legs missing. It was dressed in an extravagant Victorian evening wear. The announcer tried to communicate with the ghost, asking what it wanted. The spirit slowly started to move towards the newscaster, arms outstretched, eyes empty. The announcer fled in distress to the safety of his co-workers and told them of this encounter. A colleague accompanied him back to his room. The ghost was still there when they entered, but appeared less visible and less threatening before slowly fading away. day. Other BBC staff reported seeing the apparition in the same room, though only in October. There have been reports from other famous guests that taps will turn on in the night and turn off when investigated. Many people often struggle to sleep here and have to move rooms or even hotels. And finally, in at number 1 we have Malmaison in Oxford. This hotel is the most unique on this list. It was once a large prison located in Oxford. They have converted each cell into a hotel room. They have 95 rooms from you to choose from, starting with standard double house of correction to signature suite that is a 2-story of cells converted to a loft-style room. Oxford Castle functioned as Her Majesty's Prison Oxford from 1888 to 1996. One of the more notable prisoners to be held in Oxford Castle was Mary Blandy, an 18th century murderer who poisoned her father with arsenic. She believed the arsenic was a love potion that would force him to approve of her fiancé, a Scottish nobleman who was already married. She was hanged on April 6, 1752. It's said that her spirit still roams the castle to this day. During the Victorian era, it wasn't uncommon for children to be imprisoned inside. The youngest inmate to be held inside Oxford Prison was Julie Ann Crumpling. She was just 7 years old when she was sentenced to 7 days of hard labour for allegedly stealing a pram. Perhaps the most terrifying report comes from one of the security guards who was on his nightly patrol. The security has long been very wary of the location and had experienced several things before such an unexplained sounds, bangs, and the usual phenomena. However, on one dark night when the guard was coming to an end of his patrol, when his dog stopped and shuffled quickly backwards, growling at something in front of him, it was then 2 large shadow figures appeared before him. As anyone would do, he ran as fast as he could. A few days later, his dog died suddenly. He believed he had been frightened to death. You can stay in rooms when prisoners were once tortured and even killed. Although the hotel has been fitted to be a rather comfortable boutique hotel, it does not erase the horrors that have occurred. Sometime in the 1970s, a group were carrying out a sentence in one of the cells when poltergeist activity suddenly erupted. Things got so bad that a priest had to be called to exorcise whatever they had awoken. Would you dare stay here? I wouldn't, although maybe, we'll see. Coming in at number 5, we have Omni Shoreham Hotel in Washington, D.C. The Omni Shoreham Hotel was built in 1930 by the owner of a construction company. One of the hotel's major financial partners was Henry L. Doherty, who later lived in the hotel with his family but left soon after his daughter died in what is known as the Ghost Suite. Although there is a haunted past with the hotel, it does hold many luxurious events. Franklin D. Roosevelt even held his first inaugural ball here, and many balls have been held here since. When Henry L. Doherty lived at the hotel, he occupied Suite 870. They moved into the hotel with their maid, Juliet Brown. One night at 4 a.m, Juliet woke up feeling unwell. She rang the front desk but unfortunately died before she could speak with anyone. Not long after this happened, Henry's wife and daughter also passed away in the same room. The cause of them passing is unknown. After this unfortunate string of events, Mr. Doherty moved out of the hotel. The apartment was then unoccupied for over 50 years. The Doherty apartment was since renovated into a hotel suite. However, since this was reopened, there have been a number of weird happenings. Guests soon reported hearing faint voices and witnessed doors closing and opening by themselves. Televisions as well as lights would also turn off and on by themselves, strangely all around 4 a.m. at the same time it's believed Juliet passed away. Some occupants also said that they came back to the room with the furniture rearranged. If you do ever find yourself at this hotel, do not stay in the Doherty suite. Coming in at number 4, we have Admiral Fell Inn in Maryland. The inn has 8 buildings which date back to the late 1700s. Before becoming an inn, the building had many different uses, including a ship chandlery, a vinegar factory, a YMCA, a boarding house for actors, and a sailor's lodging house. In 1900, Fells Point was a rough place. It was full of sailors, mobster hangouts, illegal gambling halls, brothels, and sailors. A Christian boarding house and recreational center then opened, which was called the Anchorage, and the building is now the central structure of the Admiral Fell Inn. In the early 1900s, a lot of death was seen here. Mercy nuns would try to treat wounded sailors in the main building, but there was only so much they could do and many died. In 1985, it was renovated into a 38-room bed and breakfast and renamed the Admiral Fell Inn. 1996 brought upgrades and expanded it into the 80-room hotel that it is today. The inn is considered to be the most haunted place in Maryland, with many sailors even dying dying from their wounds or taking their own lives here. There may also be a number of mob victims who passed away here due to the dangerous past. One room is particularly dangerous, room 413. This room was the scene of a ghastly murder in 1999. Christopher Jones, an out-of-town guest attending a pharmaceutical convention, was killed by Gary Mick. Some of the hotel's housekeepers often get a strange feeling when they clean the room, and others refuse to go in it at all. Some feel a breeze or a hand resting on their shoulder. Others have experienced sudden cold spots and shadows darting around the room. People have also seen floating sailors sitting where a fire escape once was. Others hear knocking on their doors from butlers who once were. There have been multiple times when the hotel had to be evacuated due to hurricanes nearby. When the hotel was empty and the manager went back in for a last check, they could hear partying from one of the floors, believed to be the old sailors who used to party at the hotel. Maybe if partying with ghosts is what you're looking for, this is the place for you. Coming in at number 3, we have Ballygally Castle in Northern Ireland. The stunning Ballygally Castle was built back in 1625 and is steeped in history. The original castle served as a place of refuge for the Protestants during the Civil Wars. During that time it was handed down from fathers to sons, and in 1799 it was passed to William Shaw, the last squire of Ballygally. In the early 1800s the Shaw family lost their wealth and the estate was sold. The castle sits on a beach in Northern Ireland. It has apparently been dubbed the jewel in the Hastings crown. It is reported that while William Shaw and his family lived in the castle, a lot of sinister things happened. William Shaw was driven mad, desperate for his wife to give him a male heir to carry on his legacy. When Lady Shaw did not deliver him a son, he locked her up in a tower at the top of the castle. There are 2 stories about what happened next. One claims that Lady Shaw fell to her death while attempting to escape, while the second goes that William pushed her from the tower. I am tempted to believe the second personally. Since then it is said that over 400-year-old ghost still roams the grounds, looking for her beloved children who she was separated from. She has her own dedicated room at the hotel to try and contain the hauntings, but there have still been hauntings with guests. She has been seen wandering the grounds late at night. Others have heard her crying from within their room or feeling a presence that is watching over them. This is not a hotel you should visit with your children. If she mistakes you for one of her lost girls, there's no telling what she might do. Coming in at number 2, the Hay Adams, Washington, D.C. The Hay Adams Hotel is only 1,000 feet from the White House and known as the closest you can get to the White House without an invite. The hotel is located on the site where the 1885 homes of John Hay and Henry Adams once stood. In 1927, a property developer bulldozed the homes to build a 138-room residential hotel. Hotel magnate Julius Manger purchased the property in 1932 and changed the name to the Manger Hay Adams Hotel. He owned the hotel until his death. Manger died in this residential suite within the hotel. The ornate ceiling was the last thing he saw. This is not the first death on the land that the Hay Adams stands on. Adams' wife Marion Hooper Adams took her own life on the site in 1885. In a fit of grief, Henry Adams destroyed all of Marion's things, including her photographs and papers. It is believed by many that Henry had a mistress, and maybe that contributed to Marion's depression. Henry and Marion are buried together under a monument called Grief. Staff of the Hay Adams Hotel complained that the ghost of Clover is most active during early December, the anniversary of her death. Reports of doors mysteriously opening and closing on their own, a woman crying softly, and voices of sorrow coming from apparently nowhere. Some housekeepers have also experienced being hugged by an unseen presence. The hauntings do not stop it from being the most popular hotel in Washington and has hosted many a politician, including the Obamas, before inauguration. Just be aware, if you do stop by, you might get a hug from the spirit of Mrs. Adams. And finally, in at number 1, we have the Marshall House in Savannah. The Marshall House was opened in 1951 by Mary L. Marshall on Broughton Street in Savannah's premier shopping district. It is the oldest hotel in the area, being one of the only houses specifically built to be a hotel. It is a beautiful hotel considered by architectural historians to be the finest structure Mary Marshall ever built. Although it started as a beautiful structure and still is to this day, it has had its share of death and horror. During the Civil War, the Marshall House was occupied by the Union and used as a hospital until the end of the war. It was also used twice more as a hospital during the yellow fever epidemics of the 19th century. When it came to restoring the house in the late 1900s, they discovered human remains under the floorboards. The house became a crime scene, but they soon discovered that the downstairs room was used as the hospital surgery room. It is believed that the remains of limbs that had been amputated during the war were discarded underneath the house. Since the bones were disturbed there have been numerous claims of haunting hauntings within the home. Paranormal activity is a frequent occurrence around the hotel to this day. If you choose to stay there, you might notice the faucets turning on and off, lights that inexplicably flicker, electronic items powering themselves, toilets suddenly overflowing for no apparent reason, and disembodied voices that echo throughout the halls. One guest recalled, "A room to be wary of, 306. The loud hall noises in the middle of the night happened on the 4th floor where we just happened to be staying. I've lived in many haunted houses, but Marshall House creeped me out completely. I loved it there, but I could not rest. Yes, it is old and noisy, but there's way more going on there than meets the eye. But what else can you really expect from a city built on top of dead bodies? If you want to sleep through the night, Marshall House is not the hotel for you."
Number 5. The Banff Springs Hotel. First opening in 1888, nestled in Canada's Rocky Mountains, the Banff Springs Hotel has played host to a variety of guests over the years, not all of them mortal beings. The Banff Springs Hotel is known for its variety of ghosts, who allegedly haunt its halls, the most benign of which is Sam the Bellman. Sam McCauley was an old man from Scotland who came to Canada and became the head bellman at the Banff Springs. Sam loved his job and often joked that he would work at the hotel forever, even refusing to retire until his death in 1975. In the years since, several guests have reported a bellman in an antiquated uniform matching Sam's description, wandering the halls, asking about their stay, and even helping guests who are locked out of their rooms. Less wholesome is the famous Phantom Bride, who according to legend was married at the hotel in the early 30s. Apparently, before the wedding reception, the bride was making her way up the large marble staircase leading to the Cascade Ballroom to join her husband who was waiting at the top. She tripped on her own dress and fell down the stairs, making her husband a widower in the process. There have been tales of the bride haunting the hotel ever since, with strange crying noises being heard in the empty bridal suite, and reports of a phantom bride dancing alone in the ballroom or making her way up the fatal staircase. The most disturbing of the hauntings is the events that took place in room 873. According to legend, a man was staying with his wife and daughter in the room when he went mad and ended the lives of all involved. In the years since, the ghosts of the child and her mother have apparently remained in the room, with guests being awoken by violent screams and finding bloody handprints on the mirror that the maids could not manage to wash off. The reports got so numerous and disturbing that the hotel management sealed off the room, making it unavailable for guests. However, despite the numerous supernatural specters you may encounter, the hotel's beautiful architecture and services, as well as the scenic mountain views and the amazing skiing available in Banff, will make you never want to leave. Number 4. The Omni Mount Washington Hotel. Located in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the Mount Washington Hotel was built in 1902 by Joseph Stickney. Sadly, soon after the hotel was built, Joseph passed away, being survived by his wife, Carolyn. Carolyn eventually remarried to a French prince, but the newly minted princess continued to spend her summers at the luxurious hotel, always staying in her personal suite, room 314. In the years since Princess Carolyn's death, there have been several reported instances from guests and staff alike about seeing the princess sitting at the foot of the bed. The following story from one of the former employees is particularly chilling. In 1997, I was working as a housekeeper and had to clean room number 314, the princess's room. I went to service the room that newlyweds were staying in, and I knocked on the door and there was no answer. I opened the door, went in, and there was a little girl sleeping on the bed. Immediately, I went to the hallway to see my inspector and told her I couldn't clean the room because a little girl was sleeping. She said that was odd because the guests were newlyweds and nobody else was registered. She asked me to leave a note that I was coming back in an hour to service the room. I went back in the room to leave the note by the table. I walked in the room quietly to not wake the little girl up. When I looked at the bed, instead of a little girl, there was a woman staring right at me with the most scary smile on her face. She had black hair and was wearing a white dress. I got chills down my spine and I just stood there, frozen. She sat on the bed and kept staring at me. I ran out of the room and told my friend, who was also a housekeeper. We both went back in the room and there was no one there. I still have a hard time remembering that incident, and I get chills every time I speak about it. I have many friends that have worked there, and I heard a lot of scary things that happened. Oh, the day before this happened, my friend and I took pictures of ourselves on the princess's bed. Everybody tells me that I made her upset by doing that. There have also been tales of other areas of the hotel playing host to paranormal activity, such as this story of the ballroom. As I walked into the ballroom late one evening on a night where there was no performers, I heard the faint sounds of an orchestra playing. I thought a rehearsal was going on, and I went to see who it was. There was no one there. No one. As I walked away from the side of the stage, the lights suddenly went out, and the music got louder. It was surreal and very, very scary. I ran to the light switch and saw that it had been turned off. I turned it back on, and the lights went on for a second, and then the switch turned down on its own. The entire time, the music kept playing. I ran out and found security and told them what happened. They went in to investigate and found nothing. No music and no problem with the lights. Despite the various ghosts, the Mount Washington Resort provides guests with stunning views of the mountains and the famously beautiful foliage of the White Mountain National Forest. This combined with the amazing ski opportunities, the on-site golf course, and the fact that it has played host to several famous guests, including 3 US presidents and Thomas Edison, will make your trip a memorable vacation that you'll never want to leave. Number 3. The Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel was opened in 1909 by the American inventor and entrepreneur Freeland Oscar Stanley. In the years since its opening, it has developed the reputation as being one of the world's most famous and influential haunted hotels, having been described as the Disneyland for ghosts. All throughout the hotel, paranormal activity is reported, with vacuums being turned off or having their plugs torn out of the walls at any given moment. But there are 3 consistent sites of ghost activity on the premises that we will explore. The 4th floor of the hotel was originally a cavernous attic before eventually being converted into the living quarters for the female employees, their children, and nannies. In the years since, it has been converted into guest rooms, but the spirits of the past are still known to stick around. Guests have reported seeing their closet doors opening and closing on their own, and hearing the sounds of children running around and giggling while they play. In room 428, guests have reported seeing the ghost of a friendly cowboy appearing at the corner of the bed, who is believed to be the spirit of Rocky Mountain Jim Nugent, a guide from the late 1800s who was known for only having one eye after being attacked by a bear. Another haunted location is the concert hall, which was built by Stanley as a gift for his wife Flora, who can often be heard playing her piano late into the night. Another spirit who can be found in the hall is a former employee named Paul, who used to enforce the 11 p.m. curfew and who now nudges guests and workers who are in the hall late at night and will sometimes flicker the lights and tell them to get out. Most infamous is room 217, which is apparently haunted by the ghost of a housekeeper named Elizabeth Wilson. She apparently flickers the lights, moves objects, and will even unpack the guest's luggage. She is, however, somewhat old-fashioned and will literally try and drive a wedge between unwed couples who share the bed, with several couples describing a cold force coming between them in the night and the man's bags being packed and left by the door in the morning. Although this has never been confirmed, when the movie Dumb and Dumber was filmed in the area, Jim Carrey stayed in room 217 and was so scared by something in the room that he ran out of the room half naked and screaming in the middle of the night. The hotel was on the verge of being closed down until an author and his family stayed at the Stanley in 1974, the day before it closed for the season. They were the only guests, and the large, empty, ornate hotel left them feeling extremely uneasy. When the author and his wife stayed in room 217 that night, he had a vivid nightmare about his son being attacked in the hallways, and when Stephen King awoke, he had the idea for his best-selling novel, The Shining. In the years since the novel's publication and the release of the film adaptation by Stanley Kubrick, the Stanley Hotel has embraced its spooky reputation, offering ghost tours, having a television channel that plays the film on a loop, available for guests, and even constructing an elaborate hedge maze in order to make the hotel more like the fictional Overlook Hotel it inspired. The Stanley Hotel is a must-visit site for paranormal and horror fans that they'll never want to leave. And if they get lost in the hedge maze, they never will. Number 2. Ruthin Castle. The Ruthin Castle in North Wales was built in the early 1200s by Edward I to replace the wooden fortress that stood in its place before, as a gift to the king's loyal allies, eventually ending up in the hands of Reginald de Grey as a reward for helping Edward assemble the finest army in the world. The modern castle was built within the original castle's ruins in 1826, before being sold to be used as a hospital in 1923 and eventually being converted into a hotel in the 1960s. Some of the most famous figures that have stayed in the castle over the course of its long and storied history include King Henry VII and his daughter Mary, making this a location that you can stay in that once housed the original and authentic Bloody Mary. Although, as always, summoning her in a darkened room is not recommended. One of the most haunted rooms in the hotel is room 222, where several guests have reported sudden and extreme drops in temperature, as well as hearing slamming doors and tapping sounds all around the room. Another consistent tale is the little girl who is often seen at night knocking on guests' doors and running through the halls and on the roof while giggling. Also commonly cited is a soldier, supposedly one who died defending the castle while serving in King Edward's army, who can be seen wandering the castle grounds dressed in full medieval armor. However, the most infamous apparition is the ghost of Reginald de Grey's wife, Lady Grey. She apparently caught her husband having an affair and in a jealous rage dispatched the mistress with an axe. She was sentenced to death, and her body was not allowed to be buried on consecrated grounds and was instead buried outside the castle walls. Perhaps due to not being able to receive a proper burial, many guests and employees have reported seeing Lady Grey wandering the castle grounds, as well as the rooms on the upper floor and in the banquet hall, still carrying her axe. Despite its creepy history, this hotel is known for treating its guests like royalty, providing them with a variety of different rooms at different price points and having a world-class spa, as well as the ability to participate in a medieval banquet and tours of the grounds, the dungeons, the drowning pool, and the whipping pit, making this one castle you won't mind being laid siege in. Number 1. The Emily Morgan Hotel. Located in the American city of San Antonio, Texas, this Gothic-style building, built in 1924, was originally a medical center with its own hospital, morgue, crematorium, and psych ward. It operated in this capacity until it closed in 1976 and was eventually converted and reopened as a hotel in 1984. Although no longer a hospital, some guests have reported hearing hospital carts being wheeled up and down the halls and smelling the distinct smell of antiseptic on the 14th floor. On the 7th floor, where the psych ward operated, there are reports of a ghost bride who is known to wander the halls and wake guests with terrifying screams. In the basement, which used to house the crematorium, employees report the smell of burning flesh and the apparition of glowing floating orbs, as well as disembodied voices crying out in pain. If this isn't ghostly enough, you can look out the window and see another notoriously haunted building, as the Alamo is located directly across the street. With all the local history, you will never want to leave once you receive some of that Texas hospitality. Staying the night in a haunted hotel sounds like a stressful experience, but it still sounds preferable to staying at the Econo Lodge Motel.
Coming in at number 5, we have Capuchin Monastery Catacombs, Palermo, Italy. This location is not for the squeamish. The Capuchin Monastery Catacombs is home to thousands of well-dressed corpses, one of the world's most bizarre and morbid tourist attractions. After walking through the monastery, you descend into the catacombs, where you have the chance to share small, enclosed space with thousands of corpses that have been well preserved. Some hanging from the walls, some laying down, and others sat on benches. They believe that having the dead on display like this shows respect to them. Here, nothing stands between the living and the dead, other than a sign asking people to be respectful. The ill-lit, musty catacombs have been separated into a few corridors, each one hosting a specific type of person. There is a room for religious figures, mainly those affiliated with the monastery, for professionals such as doctors, and a room for women. There is a corpse of a person that's said to be so well preserved that she simply looks like she is sleeping. She has been given the name Sleeping Beauty. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty terrifying. It is believed that the particularly dry atmosphere allowed for the natural mummification of the bodies. Initially, priests would lay the dead on shelves and allow them to drip until they were completely depleted of bodily fluids. A full year later, the dried out corpse would be rinsed with vinegar before being redressed in their best attire and sent to their proper room to stand for eternity. Who knows how many of their spirits still roam the catacombs with no way out? It's not a question I want to find the answer to. In at number 3, we have the Alaskan Hotel in Alaska. Built in 1913 during the gold rush, the Alaskan Hotel is the oldest hotel in the area. The hotel was built to be a luxury experience for those passing by, as they advertised as a pocket version of the finest hostelry on the west coast. The high fashion and glitz were a paltry concealment for the legal prostitution and sale of illicit substances that went on there throughout its history. The hotel overcame many issues that it faced since opening, one being the 1980 imposition of bone-dry prohibition. They turned their bar into a cafe serving soda while also running a speakeasy like most of the previous bars at the time. The Alaskan Hotel was a brothel twice in her history, first legally and second not legal in 1977, which was shut down by the fire marshal. There is one main soul who inhabits the Alaskan Hotel today, and that is a gold miner's wife. She lived at the hotel while waiting for him to return. When he did not return, she began to support herself through prostitution But then he did return. When he returned to his wife, he was furious with what she had been doing and then murdered her in the hotel. There have since been a number of sightings of her at the hotel. She is said to be very angry and restless. When she is around, the air goes cold and some have reported hearing footsteps wandering the halls. Some even hear crying coming from the walls, but it is unclear where the noise is coming from. There is also a number of abandoned mines located near the town, so if you're looking for ghosts, this is the place to be. Coming in at number 2, we have City of the Dead, North Ossetia, Russia. Not many people have been to the City of the Dead. It is a dangerous and long journey to reach the village. There are also myths and legends warning that those who do reach the city never return. Reaching this mystifying destination requires a 3-hour drive, taking you down a dangerous and hidden road. It is located in North Ossetia in Russia. If you do manage to reach the city, you will come across many white huts that look like houses. However, they are not. These are actually stone crypts. It is said that in the 18th century a plague hit the city, leaving no one behind. The clans built quarantine houses for the sick. They would bring the food but not the freedom to move about until death claimed their lives. The even sadder side is that people who did not have family to build the hut or bring them food simply went to the large graveyard and simply waited for death. It was a very slow and painful way to go. For those who dare to visit the city, a little well was created outside of each home. If you drop a coin in the well and you hear it hit the stone at the bottom, then the person who died here went to heaven. If you do not hear a noise, then this indicates that the spirit did not pass on and may still be in the village. My advice would be don't visit this city. We don't need an 18th century disease. And lastly, in at number 1, we have Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, British Columbia. What first appears to be a beautiful castle is actually a haunted home with a tragic past. The Craigdarroch Castle was built in the 1800s as a home for a wealthy family, coal industrialist Robert Dunsmuir and his wife Joan. It was built over 2,300 meters and comprises 39 rooms. However, Robert died 17 months before the construction was completed. The original architect of the castle, Warren Haywood Williams, also unfortunately died before the finalization of the home. His son James and Alexander decided to finish the castle after their father's death. Robert's death caused a lot of trouble within the family. His sons James and Alex were disappointed that their father's business and assets had been left to their mother. They claimed that they had an oral agreement from their father that they would receive the family business. For the following years, they tried countlessly to get the family business from their mother, and after 7 years they finally received the title to the San Francisco Company. Feeling financially stable, Alex finally married his partner of 20 years, Josephine. However, their marriage only lasted 6 weeks as he died on their honeymoon in New York. When he died, the family was torn apart once more over his will. Joan and James fought for years, going to the highest court level. They did not speak during the legal battle, and then finally Joan passed away in 1908 in Craigdarroch Castle in Victoria, where she lived for 18 years. It was believed that James wouldn't attend her funeral, however he did at last. The house has now been taken over by the Craigdarroch Castle Historical Museum Society. There have been many ghost stories presumed to be connected to the Dunsmuir family. One of the main spectres is a woman who walks down the main staircase in a ball gown. No one has seen her in any other part of the castle, and she never goes up the stairs. Could it be the ghost of Joan going to greet her husband? In the basement of the home there have been sightings of a little girl crying, although they disappear if she hears anyone approaching. There have been multiple sightings of her. She is believed to be the youngest daughter of Robert, who died just months after he did. As well as these sightings, there have also been other weird goings on around the castle. Often people hear the crying of a child from various parts of the castle. Objects would also move on their own when no one was around. Some can also hear a piano being played in the dining room when no one is present, but there is no piano in the castle. It seems there are many ghosts of the Dunsmuir family within the castle walls who don't want to leave their home.
Number 5. The John Zaffis Museum. For someone like John Zaffis, opening a haunted museum was always in the cards. It was practically destiny. Few people can claim to come from a legacy of haunted museums, but Zaffis can, since he's the nephew of Ed and Lorraine Warren, America's most famous and oftentimes controversial demonologists. Growing up with a large fondness for his aunt and uncle's work, Zaffis developed a love of the paranormal from an early age and saw fit to try and carry on his relatives' work after their passing, opening his own collection of haunted relics the same way that the Warrens did. And what a collection of weird relics Zaffis has picked up. I'll shout out a couple of the cooler ones. The highlight for me has got to be this sword that was used to conjure black magic, and the sword is in like all of the promotional imagery, so it's gotta be pretty good. Check out this photo of Zaffis where he looks like a dark wizard who's also a fantasy author. Among the blade are things like a cast iron skull that was used in occult rituals, plenty of haunted dolls and and idols, an ornate elk skull thought to be used in something evil, and loads more. Zaffis does point out on the website, in the frequently asked questions section, not to worry too much about being exposed to this stuff, as everything that's brought into the collection is blessed before taking residence. Although they do make a small warning on the website that there is a teeny tiny small chance that any residual evil might attach to you in the museum. So, I don't know, make sure to wash your hands with hand sanitizer or holy water on the way out. I can't not include this, by the way, but the website also states that if Zaffis believes personally that any of the items in the museum have become too evil or too haunted to remain safe for public display, he throws it into an unspecified body of water. So if you're looking to start a collection of slightly used haunted relics on the cheap, I'd just check out the surrounding bodies of water to the museum. Now, unfortunately, John Zaffis' museum is currently closed. Hey, this list was about ones that had to be abandoned, right? Can't come as too much of a surprise. But for those who are hoping to get a good up-close personal look at these cursed relics, Zaffis says he's been searching for a new location for the collection. Hopefully somewhere with some good ventilation, you know, really let all that evil air flow. And hey, if you're looking for more videos about haunted museums, haunted objects, haunted dolls, haunted everything really, we've got all more of that in spades. So stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary, keep the screams coming all night long. Let's keep going. Number 4, the Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. Pack up the whole family and make sure to stop by at the gift shop for the Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. Don't worry, there's something for everybody here to enjoy. Make sure you take home the miniature guillotine. One quick look at their website is particularly illuminating. Our main product is emotion, boldly proclaimed as their slogan. Yeah, well, agonizing pain is definitely an emotion, so I can't disagree there. The Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments really is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a massive collection of real historical relics and replicas serving to highlight some of the most disgustingly creative works of engineering ever invented. The kind of stuff that would make Jigsaw and his funny little puppet blush with anticipation. The museum's goal is to remind us just how truly unimaginably cruel human beings are capable of being to each other, and the lengths to which we will go to attain such horrid ambitions. The phrase, "those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it," comes up a whole lot on the museum's frequently asked questions page on the website, which is good. So come, learn a bit from such classics like the Rack or the Brazen Bull, so you don't accidentally end up repeating those. I don't think I can even possibly describe what either of those horrifying things do without getting this channel permanently flagged. So if you're curious, maybe take the worst Google trip of your life, or go up and visit the Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments. They've got locations all over the states for your pleasure, and there's even one in Europe, but I'm pretty sure that's a different one. The one I'm talking about right now is the American one. The one in Chicago even offers a ghost hunting tour, as some guests believe there are residual spirits tied to some of the more grisly equipment kept in the dungeons. Guests are invited to spend the night on their own accord or with the safety of a tour guide to try and uncover any of the spirits that are said to be still living there, including an old executioner named Thomas who loves his work so much he just never left. Sheesh. Nearly 1,000 years and he still doesn't take a day off. Some people just love to have their nose to the grindstone, or to forcefully shove someone else's face into the grindstone. To each their own. Number 3, the Penang War Museum. I think it's a very good sign that your museum is a friendly, welcoming place. If you Google it and the first results are an article called The Horrors on Ghost Hill, and a listing for an IMDb episode for a series called I Wouldn't Go There, featuring your museum. It's either really hurting or really helping the tourism there. Well, if those warning signs weren't enough to deter you, enter the Penang War Museum, my little ghouls and goblins. It's been described as one of the most haunted spots in Asia, flat out. The Penang Museum is built atop the grave of an old army fort built by the British in the 1930s, but was taken control by the Japanese in the late 30s in World War II, and used to house prisoners for as long as the prisoners lived, which was usually not very long, if the site of the guillotine is anything to go by. After the end of the Second World War, the place had become totally abandoned, until it was retrofitted to become a museum, and serve as a reminder of the grim reality of war and its costs. The whole place kind of has this eerie, abandoned ghost town vibe as you walk through tunnels and old bunkers, serving to try and replicate what it would be like to actually work and spend time in a place like this while it was functioning. Given the very grim nature of the content and the site itself, which was home to so much bloodshed, death, hatred, and all the worst parts of our souls, it's no surprise that the museum has an infamous reputation as a spot for paranormal activity. Guests have reported seeing strange sightings, unusual shadows, and feeling chills as they walk through the bunkers. But all of this begs the question, would ghosts even be scarier than the actual truth of this place? Now, I've never been, but from what I was looking at and gathering for this, it seems to me like the true horror of the Penang Museum is that it's a reflection of some of the worst parts of the human experience. A reminder of what happens during wartime and what people do to one another. This place doesn't need stories of spirits. It's haunted enough as is by the memories that will forever be tied to it. Number 2, the Mutter Museum. Mutter is the German word for mother. That's your fact for today, so you can tell your Mutter that you learned something from this video. Well, this isn't a museum for moms or about moms, although they're more than welcome to come. The Mutter Museum in Philadelphia isn't quite like the other museums on this list. It's not particularly known for being paranormal or haunted, but rather it's a collection of medical oddities and curios all arranged behind cabinets in a very clean, professional manner. It's not known for vengeful spirits or anything walking the halls, but rather just home to an incredible amount of very creepy things in jars. Every picture of the place looks like something out of a mad scientist's lab, a background of a B horror movie set, that one weird place from that one Harry Potter movie, maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Amputated limbs float in jars next to organs, fetuses from all sorts of animals you can imagine, and more bones than you could possibly shake a femur at. They got skulls of all kinds. They got skulls for days. They got an entire wall dedicated solely to the skulls of criminals, and all sorts of broken skulls in disarray, eaten by tumors or other lovely diseases. If you're looking for skulls, they have got skulls. They've got a collection of famous remnants, Albert Einstein's brain, if you want to see if some of that rubs off on you. Grover Cleveland's famous tumor. Well, we all love Grover Cleveland's tumor. Pack the whole car up. Let's go see that. You know, fun stuff. Now, guests who visit the Mutter Museum do pretty frequently complain of feeling dizzy and uneasy while wandering through the collection, but whether or not that's because of some poltergeist or spiritual influence, or because you're wandering through a 6,000 square foot room looking at hundreds of brains, bones, and disembodied organs in jars, is up for some debate. I know just reading about this thing already makes me feel kind of squeamish, makes my stomach feel all churny. I wonder if they have a little cafe in this one, like most museums have. You think anybody's eating there? And number 1, the Museum of Death. The Museum of Death. Well, I wonder what sort of topics they enjoy covering at the Museum of Death. I bet they have an absolutely illuminating look at pre-Raphaelite art of the late 19th to early 20th centuries. They don't? What? No, at the Museum of Death, opened in Hollywood in 1995, which was opened by a married couple with the intention to make people happy to be alive. Whew. How do they accomplish this? Do they show you pictures of whiskers on kittens and raindrops on roses? No, of course not. It's a collection of everything to do with death. Bones, skulls, coffins, ancient mortician's tools, executioner's equipment, and a whole lot more. Amusingly, the owners have said their goal is not to scare anyone with this museum. That's not what their museum is about. Now sure, they play videos of autopsies and they have footage and imagery from incredibly grisly and stomach-churning real-life true crime cases like artifacts from Charles Manson's family or some of Jeffrey Dahmer's personal effects, but they don't want to scare you. The museum is there to show death in its brutal, unedited honesty. The owners themselves describe it as a commemoration of life. And I gotta be honest, I'm making it sound worse than it is, but it definitely does sound interesting. And the grimmest parts of me are definitely more than a little curious to check it out in that morbid sort of way, because it sounds cool. Probably a great date spot to take a goth girl, I bet. The museum does kind of embrace its sort of twisted reputation and really runs with it. It hosts Black Dahlia costume contests where guests are judged on who's got the best post-mortem Black Dahlia costume, which is something. It's not thought to be as haunted as some of the other places on this list, but it does really bring out some visceral reactions in people. Apparently, it's not too uncommon for guests to demand to leave early or to outright faint while walking through the museum. The owners refer to these cases as falling down ovations, which is a very funny turn of a phrase. Now, sadly, if you're listening to all of this and you're already pre-buying tickets for your next trip to LA, sadly, the museum is currently closed down. They are reopening though. They've also got a museum in New Orleans, since their collection of macabre knickknacks is so large it couldn't be contained to just one spot. When it reopens, I recommend you get out as soon as you can. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Number 5 on this list is Abbaye de Mortemer. This abbey is located in the French town of Mortemer in the Normandy region and has a deep history to it. In the mid-1500s, this was a prosperous area filled with a bunch of monks. It was a growing town that was one of the most successful in the region. This didn't last too long though. When the 1700s struck, things changed quickly. The men who were funding this town grew greedy and cared little for the people that were living there. The abbey itself started to deteriorate and the monks began moving out. Soon it was a shell of its former self and only had 4 monks that it housed. This wasn't the end though, because in 1789 this abbey saw the worst horror of its history. The French Revolution was at its height and sweeping its way through France. Religion was completely out of favor, and that meant the 4 monks that were living there were also out of favor. When the revolutionaries got to this location and found these monks, they didn't hold back. They took them into the cellar of this abbey and brutally massacred all 4 of them with no provocation. People think that this was one of the main incidents that caused this place to become one with the spirits. Since then, many ghostly sightings have been reported at this spot. One of the most famous stories was in World War II. A British paratrooper landed in the forest nearby and was spotted by the Germans. He thought he was doomed for until a monk appeared out of nowhere and guided him to safety. It's believed that this is one of the spirits of the dead monks still trying to help those in desperate need. One of the most famous ghostly legends is the woman in white who wanders the grounds. This ethereal being floats through the area and was even photographed once before. Her origin is currently unknown, but it seems that after the monks were killed, this area became home to not only their spirits, but many. Werewolves, goblin cats, and other demonic things have also been spotted here. This place is deeply haunted, and even though that one paratrooper was saved by a ghost, I think that's the exception rather than the rule, and for that reason, I still wouldn't recommend going here. Number 4 on this list is the Château de Brissac. This chateau in France is located in the Loire River Valley south of the village of Angers in France. It's a very beautiful chateau and extremely unique because it's actually a mix of 2 different chateaus. In the early 11th century, an initial castle was built on the land, but then several hundred years later, in the 15th century, the land was taken over by the Duke of Brissac, who had his own vision for the space. He tore down most of the castle except for the twin medieval towers and then built around those, so you get this very interesting style of chateau. This chateau is also apparently the tallest in all of France. The great beauty of this castle and unique architecture aren't the only things that distinguish it though, because it's also one of the most haunted. An expert on the castle named Wesley McDermott gives great insight into the entity haunting this building, where he says, "A double murder that occurred sometime in the 15th century within the walls of the castle has resulted in one of the more popular ghosts of the Château de Brissac, that of the La Dame Verte, or Green Lady. The current residents, the Duke of Brissac and his family, have become accustomed to her roaming the rooms, but she has scared many a guest. She's often seen in the tower room of the chapelle wearing her green dress. What's most terrifying, however, is her face. If she looks at you, you'll see that her face has gaping holes where her eyes and her nose should be, resembling a corpse. As well as her sighting, her moans are often heard throughout the castle in the early hours." After researching this, I found that Wesley was correct, and there is no end to the stories and encounters people have had with this Green Lady. I honestly do recommend going to this castle to look at its beautiful exterior. Going inside, though, is something that I wouldn't do. Number 3 on this list is Grès-les-Bains. This is a commune that is in the southeastern part of France. The reason why this town is so haunted is because of all the conflicts that have taken place there over the years. If you name any significant war that has happened within France, it's most likely that at some point or another, a battle was fought at this place. This has caused a lot of untimely death of soldiers and also the civilians who were living there. All of this death has left some spirits behind and made it so that this town is deeply haunted. Even though this is a town, the area that is most haunted seems to be located close to the castle at the top of this town. The reason that I say at the top is because this is a mountaintop village, and the way that this town is laid out has the castle right at the zenith. Therefore, everything is cascading down from this haunted castle that towers over the rest of the residents. There isn't one ghost who lays a rule to this town, but a collection of ghostly spirits. It's said that if you walk around the castle at nighttime, then many voices will start to speak out of thin air. Shadows will dance on the walls as if someone is around you, but once again there'll be nothing. People also report having a deep sense of uneasiness when they're in this area and feel unwanted. The ghosts here don't sound as dangerous as some of the other ones, but I still don't recommend checking this place out. Number 2 on this list is Chateau de Blain-de-la-Tour. This is a castle that is located directly in the village of Blain-de-la-Tour. This castle certainly isn't the most ornate in nature. It looks to prioritize functionality over beauty. This was largely because its main use was during the 100 Years' War and the French wanted to make sure it wouldn't get captured by the British. This castle is very unique with its haunting. It's always haunted by one specific ghost, which I'm going to get into, but on one particular day of the year, this place goes off the rails with paranormal activity, and it's this event that has given the castle the title as the most haunted castle in all of France. At midnight on All Saints' Day, which is on November the 1st, it's said that a plethora of phantoms will fly out and circle around the tower of this castle. They will scream and wail and cause a major ruckus. People have also said that these wailings feel inherently sinister in nature, almost as if these ghosts are driving people away from this place. Reports have also said that chains can be heard smashing against the walls, and screams from below in the tower are heard as if people are locked up there. This event only takes place on November 1st at midnight though, and is now part of the lore and culture around this village. On a regular day, this castle isn't completely without ghostly apparitions though. The ghost of the master of the castle from the 11th century walks throughout in a bloodied outfit. It's said that he was murdered with a dagger and that his spirit walks around to this day still holding that same dagger which killed him. Number 1 on this list is Chateau de Bonneguil. This castle is located in the Saint-Front-sur-la-Masse and was built in the medieval ages. It's decently well kept considering how old it is today. As with most castles that were built around that time, this one played a critical role in the 100 Years' War. It's said that it was fought over multiple times and retaken by both sides multiple times as well. Aside from its deep history, reports of a potential haunting have run rampant all throughout France. In fact, people were so convinced that a spiritual presence was living here that a team went to go investigate it. This group of paranormal experts went in and made some startling discoveries. They said that when they got there, the thing that they noticed and detected the most was the sensation of somebody touching their shoulder, as if somebody was right behind you and had their hand just on one of your shoulders. This went hand in hand with a sensation of burning. Apparently the burning didn't have them in pure agony, but they were all reportedly uncomfortable for sure. The temperature changes didn't stop there either, because it also got incredibly cold all of a sudden. Creepy noises, loud shouts, and a very guttural and deep moan that echoed throughout the castle were all things that this group had reported as well. Nobody knows who or what ghostly spirit is causing these occurrences, but it's clear that something isn't quite right about this French chateau.